Okay. All right. Cool.
So I
Oh.
thought the story, the introduction of it was focused on the river and
Mhm.
that living by a river and the river itself carrying some sort of wisdom or understanding of yourself. Am I on track at all? Or does anyone have any ideas about it?
Yeah, because it was saying like how you're reflected in the river.
Yes, that's how I understood it. I especially liked that it said that learning to speak is learning to say that our river has a source in the other world well. So
Yeah.
to me, that connection to speak, that connection to the thing that makes us like the image of God, the ability to speak creation into the world, that we're the only animal that has speak this way. Um, to me, that shows that like our very consciousness, our intelligence, um, our thing that carries the image of God, that is what has its source in the other world. Um, that it's not explicable by simple material means. That um,
Mhm.
we are evidence, our speech is evidence of a connection to this other world. That's how I read it.
I like that.
Do you see it as a tie-in to um, the square with four rivers?
Yeah,
Uh,
I
the
saw that.
cosmic, yeah, the cosmic mountain. I think there's one river as a source, but it is because it's at the top, the apex of the mountain. It it just naturally flows into four in an order, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's at in the Garden of Eden, the head of the four rivers. It starts from one stream that splits into four. Um, so and then the four represents like the four ends of the earth. So from the middle all the way to the edge. So the source of all rivers is this other world well. Eden.
Hmm.
Right. So I think we're all talking about the same thing.
I liked. I'm trying to find it, but the image I got, I can't quite remember like why I got it or where he talks about it, but it was like the divine feminine, like we were talking in that other divine feminine group, and I just
Mhm.
felt like, oh, this like goes along with that, like the rivers, the river and the otherworld river. Does he call it, or I mean,
I don't know in these chapters it's called
well, the river
oh
is
yes,
the cow, and the
yes,
cow is also
the woman, yeah.
the woman. Yeah, so that's why. Hmm.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. So that does flow one to the other. The woman is the cow and the cow is the river.
Yeah.
Which also works from a Matthew point of view because the river and time are the circle feminine side as opposed to the dry land, which is a masculine space.
Hmm.
But we kind of see both masculine and feminine personifications of the land in this sort of like Irish mythology.
Hmm.
Uh, they're primarily feminine, but I don't think they always are. It'd be interesting to pay attention to that as we go through.
Hmm.
I think there's a kind of interplay between the land and the time in the land. Like the seasons are time on the land. Um, the change that happens on the sort of like eternal ground. So, I loved that sentence. Our river has its source in the otherworld well.
Yeah.
Um, the hazel tree and the salmon, we've run into that myth many times over, I want to say, in this group, through
Mhm.
Martin Shaw, just through mythology in general. And it fits with Matthew's statement that we live in a tree-centric universe. That was the statement in one of the very first chapters of Language of Creation, which is pretty cool because it seems to be pretty universal. Um, so let me kind of skim our way through this page. Well, I don't know what page it is, the first page of this chapter, and we'll make some comments as we go. There is Nectan's well. I did some research on Nectan, who is both a Irish god and a saint from the 400s and 500s. And as a saint, his story is that he one time, so he wanted more seclusion in his world to be like the desert fathers. So he went to find some wilderness that he could be in and spent quite a bit of time out there, and then sort of got more and more removed and secluded. And then one day he helped a swineherd recover his pigs they had run off. And as a gift, the swineherd gave him 2 cows. And then one day, thieves came and took the cows. And he went to go get the thieves, but instead of fighting them, he tried to convert them. But they slit his throat. They cut his head off. And
Oh.
so his head rolled to the ground, and he picked it up and kept preaching the message while he's holding it in his hand. And one of the thieves, on seeing it, went insane, and the other one, um, I think he did convert and like buried the body, like because he was dead. He just had enough to like finish what he was saying, basically, and then buried him under a river. And to this day, there is a place called Nechtan's. It has a couple of words that are foreign to me, but it's essentially a waterfall that comes right out of a rock. Like there's a hole in the rock. It comes out and then down 60 feet. And at the bottom, the pool is a deep well. Like it goes deeper than just the riverbank. So that's pretty cool and pretty relevant, I think, to the themes we're discussing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I love the idea that um, the two responses are insanity or like submission to the gospel. So that's kind of what happens with this. Um, when he says he has to go up to the hills, and he has this place that's kind of like a religion that won't fit inside the confines of religion. That when you're in that space, you have two options. You can like submit to it, or you can go crazy. um, kind of like those two thieves.
Hmm.
But just an interesting coincidence, an interesting aside on Nectan. That is
Yeah.
the Saint Nectan. Go ahead, Candace.
Oh, I just said thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, there were so many Wikipedia trails to go on from just this one page alone.
Yeah.
Now Nectan as a deity was the husband of the Bowen, the cow river goddess.
Oh.
Yeah, but she has an affair with another god, and um, she approaches the well um, to try to like fool him about the affair, and she tries to like I was a little confused reading the Wikipedia stories because they all kind of were a little bit contradictory.
Mhm.
She challenges the power of his well by going around it counter sunwise. And I could show you in the stars how that makes perfect sense, but I don't want to get too distracted by, um, explaining with stars. But we should think about it, in terms of what does the story mean first. And so she goes around it counter sunwise. And the word for it was a unique expression. It was something like wither shins is how they described it, going around the other way.
Mm.
Um, and this causes the well to surge like a flood, and it carries her away, and she loses an arm, a leg, and an eye, and then finally dies, um, being swept away by that water. So very interesting, very interesting. These sort of background stories that he might expect us to know, or sort of be frustrated with us that we don't already know these things. Um,
Yeah.
but very interesting.
I wouldn't maybe not so much stories as images too. Like I could see Moriarty. I don't know, or that he John probably like went to these places, like traveled to these places too,
Hmm.
and he's working. So I don't know if he'd be frustrated.
Yeah, that's fair.
It would be like not knowing the images, like the images associated with the Bible, the
Right.
Hebraic tradition.
Right.
It's almost like inviting you in to
Yeah.
discover these places for yourself, you know?
Yeah. It does absolutely make me want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Let me read Jill's comment. She says, Abraham is the form of loving kindness, chesed, that just gives without considering the other, outflowing source. The opposite of Noah, who contains the good but does not share. But he needs the balance of empathy, of Jacob, of rachamim. What's rachamim? Compassion. Okay. Rachum, I know. Chamim, is that plural maybe? Compassion, but the etymology of womb-like love, that's right, makes a space and holds the others, considers what they actually need, what forms love. Jill, do you want to expound on that at all, or?
It was just kind of a response. I'm pulling in other ideas, but a response to the source of the river that that's overflowing. I mean, you mentioned it, and that's what I thought of when you were talking about this Otherworld river.
Mm-hmm.
And it does flood you, and
Yeah.
it does feel overwhelming, like it's otherworldly, and you don't understand it. I think that's what I was. But I also like the idea that there were three things that flow together. You know how I like threes.
Mm-hmm.
Threes to me say, God is here, pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because of that threeness, those three people showing the aspects that we know they show. I mean, I was thinking about Abraham in the desert, in the wilderness, with his tent flaps up,
Mm-hmm.
and he's really digging wells. He is that well, or
Yes.
the what is it? The waters below,
Right.
or
All of the
looking.
patriarchs are well diggers. That's right.
Yeah. Thank you. So I just think it ties in to our book, our general book.
Absolutely. And the thing about wells is that they pull from the waters beneath, even when there's no rain. And if you can harness a well, you get subconscious watering. So before the fall, all of the world was um, gardened, kept green by the rivers. In fact, in some traditions, they're thought to be underground rivers because they're watering everything and keeping it fresh. Your mileage may vary. But then after that, so because the water is coming from underground and because man does not have to work, there are no thorns or thistles. There's no such thing as weeds because there's no such thing as walled gardens. So you don't have to work consciously for your food. It just comes up by itself from this underground water. But then after taking the knowledge of good and evil to themselves, after deciding, no, we're going to run things, then they have to be conscious of when it rains and when it doesn't. That's why I said rain had not yet fallen on the earth. Well, after the fall, they have to pay attention to the rain. They have to make the gardens. They have to work for the food. And just like in our chapter, it said that this goddess, Morrigu, would not send the rain even if you asked for it. Is this idea that uh, the rain comes from above, right? And it comes with careful calculations. How many inches fell this year? Is it going to be enough for our food to ripen at the proper time? Is it going to fall on the crops when they're just about ready to be harvested? And are we going to lose a lot of it to mildew? Um, so there's this idea that you need the rain if you don't have that well underneath. Um, and there's a whole interplay of those themes throughout the Bible of God sending rain when the nation is doing what it's supposed to and withholding it when they're not. And then, so the rain and the rainfall is connected to yes or no, good or bad. Whereas the water that comes from underneath is like this primordial provision. So that's the water from the rock that follows them in the desert, and um, it's the wells that the patriarchs dig, and it's the woman at the well that we always meet in the Bible. Um, so there's like these two sources of water. I find it interesting that when he's sort of crushed by this sense of religion that won't fit into religion, it's this, well, you can't count on the rain just because you're being good. You can't count on the rain just because you've made a story to cover all of the spiritual aspects of life, that you've got it all figured out and you can handle all of this in your own knowledge. Instead, you have to know that this Otherworld river is the one that gives us our speech that comes from that other place. And so he talks about the difference between being in the heights or being in the depth in the dream time. And I would like to talk to you guys about how he first poses that you're only safe in the heights once you know that you're already safe in the depth. But then he goes back and he says, actually, it's the divine ground behind both of those things that makes you safe. So, did anyone have any thoughts on what I just said about rain and water, or about what Moriarty says about heights, depth, and divine ground?
I have a comment about the well. Might not be exactly what you're looking for, but something struck me there that a well is shaped like the tree of life. You know, it's created with a purpose. It reaches down into the depths. It gathers potential into a singularity, and brings it up to water the fruit.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I just watched a video about the rivers of Eden, and they were saying, well, actually, rivers don't usually start in one place and spread out. They usually start in different places and join. and he's talking about like the Tigris and Euphrates and things like that. And I thought, yeah, that's right, because we're not really talking about the local geography of any particular place. We're talking about, like Kevin said, a fractal expansion. Just like a tree is a trunk that spreads into branches, and each branch is a representation of the tree, and each branch has leaves that are representations of the branch, and so on and so forth. That's how you spread out to everything. It's almost like the river is the dream of the tree. Let's see. Tommy provided a quote here. And the folktale knows what so many people no longer know. It knows how to walk the path to Glen Cwtch. In Glen Cwtch, the world has shaken off the habit of being worldly. In Glen Cwtch, we come to see the world's habit of being worldly is not in the world. It is in our eyes. And the folktale sees, I see. And the folktale lives, I live. As the folktale lives, I live. And the path to my door, that too is a folktale.
That's
Folktales are
from
good. Yes.
that's from the other story, yeah.
Yes, I love that idea. Folktales are the wells we dip our buckets into because it's speech, right? The speech is the thing that tells us we're not of this world, that we're different than the animals, and that we have something in us that's ready to talk before we even know how.
What 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 you said about like the difference between work and like and and like when they're like rain falling from above and how all of that worry was coming. Could you restate that?
Yeah, before chapter 2 of Genesis says, in those days the rain had not yet fallen, and in those days the rivers watered the earth, and it's not until we have to work for our food with conscious effort to build walls and to distinguish between weed and crop and to count on seasonal rains at their appointed times in order for anything to harvest. That is the conscious effort. That is, God says he will send the rain if and only if you are keeping the covenant. So there's a conscious work that has to go into covenant keeping after the fall.
Yeah, and differentiated that from being like covering everything, uh, or trying to like cover like how other gods they covered all of the base, like with the like covering all of the bases, or speaking, um, like trying to do everything good or well.
Yes. Well, I was thinking about the book of Job, and I was thinking about how Paul Van der Clay spoke about it at one time, and how like the Bible Project has a video on Job that I really liked, and I was discussing that with some people about a month or so ago. But in Job, he and his three friends are talking about the way justice is supposed to work. That if you're good, then you get good rewards, and if something bad happens to you, then you must have done something bad. And that, to me, is the religion that Moriarty says is the safe, comfortable story that's going to cover you. Except that safe, comfortable story, when you go up to the heights, you see it doesn't cover everything. So what's going on up here in the heights? This is an uncomfortable story. And then in Job, there's a fourth person who shows up. And he comes and says, you don't have the perspective to make this call. God does run things justly. And you don't know why he might allow something bad to happen. Maybe it's for this, maybe it's for that. And this, yes, the young point of view, this new point of view that comes in is sort of bringing about what Paul Vanderklay is calling this new, I forgot his word for describing it, but it's like a new wisdom, a new metric of wisdom, because the old metric that do good gets good, do bad gets bad, is not a big enough story to cover reality. So the new story has to have an other world, because without it, you don't have anything big enough to hold justice, divine justice, because I see that the race does not always go to the swiftest. You end up in Ecclesiastes, you know, what is going on here by saying, I don't have a story big enough to cover what I see happening. But at the same time, I believe that God is just. And to me, that's what Moriarty's saying about being on the heights. But if you're on the heights, there must be another world, right? Because that is the only thing that's the divine ground that he was talking about that gives you a scale big enough for the justice to fully play out.
Yeah,
So
I like that.
Sorry, I feel like I'm preaching, but that's where my mind went. It takes a lot of words to get all of that out for discussion.
I liked the phrase, you must be religious, but in being religious, you must have no recourse to religion.
Yes.
I had to kind of like look that up, like what it kind of meant more.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked these little parts of what I found. It said it implies a demand for a direct, personal, experiential spirituality, a kind of religiosity that arises from lived encounter with the sacred, not from inherited belief systems. And so it says it means you must live with religious depth, perceive the world. Sorry, my house is noisy. Perceive the world as sacred, act with devotion, awe, and moral seriousness, but without relying on or hiding within the conventional forms of religion.
Yes. Oh, go ahead, David. I saw your mic go on.
Oh. Let's see. To me, that had echoes of like Paul, who could say, he could boast, that he was Pharisee of Pharisees, but then he also says, like, I'm chief among sinners. So it's like he's this, as whatever tie you have to some religiosity, it's nothing to stand on in the face of God. Like that gap is so wide, that's kind of how it hit for me. But
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting that we can pull a lot actually from getting Paul involved in this. But in the Job story, right after that fourth friend comes in and says, actually, you don't have a framework big enough to make this claim that God is not being just to you. That's when, to use Moriarty's words, Job's wonder eye is opened. I loved that expression. That he says, like his father was blunt. If in the eyes of the world you are embarrassed by your beliefs about the world, then you may conclude that the wonder eye which is in all of us hasn't yet opened in you. And Job gets thoroughly embarrassed in front of his friends and then has his wonder eye opened and gets a frame breaking that gives him a tour of the entire cosmos and God, gives him this view, this wild, sweeping view from the whirlwind that he doesn't have anything like the scope necessary to make that kind of a judgment. So the opening of the wonder eye is that, like, being devastated by holiness. Like Moriarty calls it, he was plowed and harrowed. I liked that. Perfect imagery. So
Quite a visual.
yes. So to bring Paul back into this with the wonder eye, Paul had the blindness right after he had a divine vision. He then has a physical blindness that has to be lifted. This reminds me that the hazel tree that drops its hazelnuts. I don't know if you guys know what a hazelnut looks like. I know what it looks like because we have we have both. We have hazelnuts and we have buckeyes in Ohio. Kind of our thing is we have the kind you can eat and the kind you can't eat, but they look identical. The actual, once you open the leathery seed pod, inside is a dark, bigger than a quarter oval, and on that dark oval there is a dime-sized pale brown tan spot. So the hazelnut looks like an eye, and that eye falls into the sacred river. So, of course, your vision is what's affected when you eat the hazelnut. I was thinking that really, even that bit, which is inside the leather husk, can float. This round piece floats, and you have to crack that open yet again to get the edible part out. So it really is like an ark floating in the water with a seed, the kingdom of heaven inside. And if you can eat that eye, that piece of vision, then you can get a new vision that has the whole kingdom of heaven inside of it.
Nice.
So the blindness, the wonder eye, the eye of the storm, the eye of, God's voice from the eye of the whirlwind. These all go together to me.
I noticed in this chapter, and then can't remember if it was the second or third story, but and maybe it said it in all of the stories, but I noticed it in two. This story, he says, just before the quote you read about your wonder eye, he says, "Up here is a rock, and it says every 7 years at Samhain, is that how you pronounce that? It turns into an old woman driving a cow." So the rock. And then in the other chapter, it said that the folktale does that. Every 7 years at Samhain, the folktale turns into an old woman driving a cow. What does that mean?
Well, what turns the rock into an old woman?
The
Vision,
time.
I would imagine. Oh, time, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is every 7 years at Samhain.
But also the folktale.
Mm.
The folktale and the rock. Well, the folktale is what's turning the rock into an old woman, because the folktale is what tells you that the rock is turning into an old woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, both are layered on top of each other. Without the folktale, the rock doesn't turn into an old woman from your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
This is how enchantment works, is that mundane objects become enchanted when a narrative is placed on them. And then you believe the narrative.
Yeah.
So does it look like the cycle of work needs to be renewed? So you've made a religion, or you've made a contextual thing that you can get inside of as how you live your life out. And then you come to the 7 and you find out, no, it has to be renewed. It has to be washed away. And you have to be renewed by something higher than yourself.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So in America, we've lost our tradition that does what you're talking about, or it used to do what you're talking about. So it used to be that every house had a china cabinet, and in that china cabinet was really old dishes that were passed on from generation to generation. Eventually, we stopped having those things because the story was lost, why they were important. And that china cabinet full of china became disenchanted and mundane. So we got rid of them.
mm-hmm.
The old rock that turns into an old woman, it stays in the place that it is because of the folktale. The minute that folktale dies, that rock is going to be removed, and somebody's going to put a fence over it in that spot, or a house, right? To this day in Ireland, there are some trees that they don't remove from farmland because it's a fairy tree. But the only reason why that is still in place is because of the folktale.
That's cool.
That's true. I like that.
Well, and yeah, okay, now just reading on a little more, I think that helps them all make sense because, okay, so then it says that quote, if in the eyes of the world you aren't embarrassed by your beliefs about the world, then you may conclude that the wonder eye, which is in all of us, hasn't yet opened in you. And then he says, that's how it was with me in those days. No sooner had I learned the world and learned my way in it than standing in front of a rock or a tree, I'd have to unlearn it. And then he says, so he'd be there, but then there she'd be, the old woman driving her cow in through my front door and out through my back door, leaving me homeless yet again. So the old woman driving the cow represents this like change, like, or kind of, it's kind of like you got to see something differently,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, the homelessness that he's talking about is that same concept that we read in the first story with Kenwyn kind of realizing that he's not himself anymore, that he's the person he's had the persona of. So what the folktale does is it moves in, it tells you a story,
Mm-hmm.
and then you lose your identity, and then you realize that you don't belong where you are right now, and so you have to make changes because you'd rather live in the type of world the folk tale is talking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so she's like a reminder of.
It could be a reminder, or it could be a total like destroyer. It's hard to tell with folk tale because they apply differently to everybody. They
Okay.
kind of meet you where you are, or they meet you where you are, but then try to aim you where you're supposed to go.
Yeah, I kind of see her as like a call to repentance.
Yeah.
In a way. Okay.
Honestly, I'm hesitant to define her meaning specifically because she seems to not like having meanings defined. I think
That's
it's
a good point.
something of a continual frame breaking. Like it's a frame breaking built into the narrative.
Yeah.
That when you get to the last note, it's not going to be harmonious unless you let it resolve in a broader melody that's not contained in the one that you just finished. So the 7 years to me represents like a Sabbath cycle finishing, but it's like a a call to an eighth day, that there's an end creation and a new creation eternally unfolding. That your enchantment continually has to be remapped. That folktales, the funny thing about folktales is a lot of them, if you just pick up a compendium of Grimm stories, are going to be sort of simplistic, moralizing tales. And then there'll be something in it that just is not a moralizing thing. Like it'll sort of break itself even as it's telling its own story. So it's interesting the role that fairy tales play that way. That it's like, oh, this is the way to do things. Always, lock your door. That might be the moral that's said out loud at the end of the story. But then you realize, even though this has been tacked on at the end, or maybe it was there always lock your door. You realize that there's elements in the story that are undermining that conclusion, and that really that conclusion is something of a red herring, that's really not what the story was about at all. So you retain this little bit of wisdom, and maybe it helps you live your life after that. Like, oh, I'm always going to remember to lock my door because I remember that story. But there should remain something in you that knows that the door and its locks were incidental to the adventure that happened. I don't have a specific example, but I read a book once that made that statement about folktales, so I didn't believe it. But I don't think I've contradicted anything that's been said, just sort of putting my spin on it.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, I unfortunately have to go. It's getting close to the half-hour mark here. I put the next 3 chapters in the, well, I haven't. I have now put the next 3 chapters in the Martin Shaw chat. Please feel free to keep talking and keep me posted and keep good notes for me. So thanks, everybody. I'll see you next week.
Thanks,
Do you
Anna.
want to quickly hear
Thanks.
about
Bye-bye.
Martin Shaw
Bye-bye.
in person?
Oh,
Oh, what?
yes.
I saw Martin Shaw last night as part of his teaching series thing that I'm going
You
to again
did?
tonight and tomorrow. And his first session was on the Celtic saints. So he talked
No.
about Glen and Brendan and Abigail and Bridget and several others. And today he's going to get into more stories from the Bible. I think he's going to talk about Jacob's ladder, and he teased a couple things. But it was a lot of references to places that he had been in the last month, which was really cool and very Moriatria take.
I love that.
So yeah, he was awesome. It was like an hour and a half, no notes, no dropped words or like he's amazing.
Wow.
So good times.
That is so cool. Well,
And it was
if
all
you,
filmed, so it is going to be
Oh, wow.
presented somewhere. I mean, it's part of this course, but the guy that filmed it is also his producer of his YouTube channel. I met him as well. He's a really neat guy. He went to one of Martin's workshops like a couple years ago, and it was in England or Ireland, and he's a filmmaker, and he was like approached him after it and was like, hey, would you be interested in doing something in film, or you know, like starting something like that? And Martin was like, strangely, I've been looking for that exact person. Let's do it. So that was the origin of the Jawbone series.
Wow. That is so cool.
Yeah.
Well,
I
I
love
tell you what, if you get the chance to corner him, I've got to, hold on, I'm going to send you a picture.
Okay.
Let's see, I think it's this one. Show him this picture and ask him if his if he can see his white cow in this picture.
Ooh, okay.
All right.
Yeah, I will definitely get to talk to Isaiah, the producer, who has his ear. So, yeah, that might happen.
All right, yeah, you ask him for me if he knows that the white cow is really there, or has he been waxing poetic all this time?
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
everybody.
Thanks.
I'll see you next week.
All right. Bye.
Bye. That was awesome, David. Wow.
Yeah.
What a trip.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Now I'm really mad at you, though. So you have to, I guess I'll just leave.
There was another crazy person that I met. So there was a guy on this server whose name is Joseph, and he had been in a voice chat. This is like a year ago, and they were talking about Martin Shaw or something, and they were saying, yeah, there's some guy on the server that lives in Tennessee and knows the producer or something. And somebody very confidently said, "Oh, that must be David McGee. Look him up. He's on the server." So Joseph sent me a message and was like, "Hey, are you in contact with Martin Shaw's producer?" And I was like, "Can't say that I am. Sorry." So months go by, and there's a guy at my church. He's a deacon, and his son lives on the far other end of Tennessee in Johnson City, and he's in film. He has worked on a bunch of things, and including the House of David show that's on Amazon. So months had gone by since this Joseph guy had written to me and was like, "Are you this guy?" And I was like, "Well, maybe this is the guy that you're looking for, because he's in filmmaking, And I mentioned that, and he's like, "No, I'm in Chattanooga. I don't know him." And then, okay. So then a few months later, there's the Martin Shaw Substack, and he announces that this class is going to happen in Chattanooga. So I get excited, and so I write to Joseph. I'm like, "Hey, do you know this is happening?" He's like, "No, I did not, but I'm glad to know it." So I register for it, and the email comes in that says I'm registered, and it's from this guy Isaiah Smallman, who's Martin's producer that lives in Chattanooga. So then I write to Joseph. I'm like, "Do you know this guy Isaiah?" It's like, "Yeah, I do." He goes to my church. He's but interestingly, I was the one that told him about this event that the guy that he knows personally was running, but he hadn't said anything about it. So we all met up and told that story last night, which was fun.
That's really fun. Huh. Does anybody want to stay and talk about the other two stories?
So the second one was super short,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, we could.
Yeah.
I kind of get tripped out by this series of stories, but Anna said some things that gave it some coherence for it. There was so much like self-referential, going in circles, mirroring, that kind of stuff that I was kind of like struggling. But then when she talked about, I mean, it's in the text, it's like the conclusion of that first story is very clear that he's talking about the divine backing of above and below, the heights and the depths is where he's going with this. And so that helped.
Yeah. Can I read that quote?
Yeah.
It says, 26 years later, sitting in my house by Lynn Fike, I was able to say, it is in divine ground behind all depths and heights that we are safe. That summer, sitting in my reconstructed hut between the paps, I was able to say, it is from divine ground behind and within them that we become able for our depths and heights.
I keep having the same idea, which is about prudence and self-preservation, and that it is important. It's like 6, but you want 7 and 8, right? You want to continue. So you're building this self-centered hut, protects you. And then the true divine, I guess it's a white cow, walks through and demolishes it. Then the call is to find the center in God instead of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like don't put your faith in your own self. Yeah.
If you like, and don't put your faith in this religious, what he's describing as religion, which is more like a system of impersonal, or a way of a system,
Yeah.
as like the final thing. Like if you keep building, and that system could be you're putting yourself before, or in addition to what you were saying.
Yeah, it's
I
almost
see these two ideas in tension, like building this safe place, and then a system of like the religion that is devitalized, that he encountered.
mm-hmm. Oh, I never got to hear what Anna thought about the second story, that quote about the stars being mirrored in Lynn Fike.
Yeah, I think she said something about that on the chat though.
Did she kind of expound? I remember her saying, I felt like that whole chapter was for me. Or
Yeah, that's what it
but
was.
but I don't know.
Yeah, it would have been nice to hear more.
Yeah, some details. Well, maybe she'll get her to write something.
But sometimes she comes back in if we're still talking later.
Yeah.
Too.
Okay, what
So
did
this
you think?
last story, can we go there?
Yeah, the third one?
Yeah, it was like super dominated by these long quotes from these different thinkers.
Yeah.
Which was like a change of pace or change of style from the other stories so far.
Yeah.
There was this one quote that I liked kind of in the middle. It said, the voice of someone in Gethsemane in the Gethsemane of our time and place, the voice of someone Christianity isn't watching with. It is a voice we cannot hear. Hearing it, the Christian empire stands appalled. Hearing it, the Christian empire drops the reins. The empire might die, but a Christianity without an empire isn't a Christianity without hope. A politically destitute Christianity isn't a dead Christianity. A Christianity destitute though it be that crosses the Kedron with Jesus is giving itself to adventure, the greatest there is.
Yeah, I had that highlighted. What did you think about it, David?
Well, it kind of related to me about some of the things we were talking about earlier as far as like religion not being a crutch to lean on, or not being something to boast about, proud of, or he's writing from this position of like, you know, post-Christian empire, and where are we? And that's okay. That's kind of what I get of it. It's a place to be.
I looked up what the Kedron is. Did you guys know what that is?
Isn't it a river near Jerusalem?
Yeah, it says the brook or valley of Kedron lies east of Jerusalem, between the city and the Mount of Olives. In the Gospels, John 18:1, Jesus crosses the Kedron after the Last Supper. And so it kind of marks the threshold between his ministry and his passion. So it's like going from all the good, happy things into the suffering, like it's going into dark, the dark suffering. And so I think, so it was saying like crossing the Kedron is being able to go into that dark night, and well, let's read this. It means to follow him beyond comfort, security, and worldly assurance into the region of vulnerability where faith is tested. A Christianity that does this, even if destitute, poor in means, prestige, or certainty, undertakes the supreme adventure to accompany the divine through suffering into renewal.
And this section closes where he talks about the name of our nave until now was Evangel, and now it takes the name Evangelanta.
Yeah.
And then he talks about it being an ark, and that is a classic thing that you'll see in a lot of the church fathers, is the reference to the ark being like a prototype of the church, or the church being like a boat, like a place of safety, and that's can ride the waves of chaos. There's other sometimes, and also boats are I don't know all languages, but I feel like if you talk about a boat, you talk about she, like it's feminine.
I see where you're headed, David, because I think the ark and quite a bit of the tabernacle furniture is pointing at Mary, or, I don't know if specifically that's the way to look at it, but at least the feminine is carrying the good. So if Noah, the grace is being carried in the feminine for the world, but really there's what would you call it? There's a separation. So it's the flood, which is feminine, and the ark, which is feminine, carrying the good inside. I know I'm probably being too poetic and visual instead of words, but
no,
you got it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
I was also, I feel like in these 3 chapters, it was, it just seemed to be, well, in all of the chapters so far, right? There's this feminine thing that he's talking about. But I really, I saw like that, like the temple and the rivers flowing from it, like that scripture. that, you know, talks about the construction of the temple and the rivers flowing as being like Mary. Yeah. I don't know. I thought of the same thing. Did you guys think of any, or what did you think about the three stories that he talked about, the three experiences of the people?
I did think it was unusual that D.H. Lawrence wrote that adventure, because he's the one that wrote Lady Chatterley's Lover, and it was scandalous and censored. So this person had a deeper, broader faith than I understood before. I mean, I just sort of wrote him off, although my mom has his book. So how come I haven't read it? Well, because I'm afraid of it, actually. Because it is, you know, like maybe if I looked at it symbolically, it wouldn't be so shocking, but it's about a woman who is married to a paraplegic. And she has an affair with the gardener. Well, just on the surface, I think I'm not going there, right? But what if that's not what it's about? However, the fact that he calls it adventure, that Christianity has lost its way, it's you know how, doesn't Martin Shaw talk about being dangerous? And or someone does, you know, we need to be dangerous again. And are we relying on the empire, which would be headed up by an emperor, and that emperor isn't God? Who is the emperor? Why are we so trying to prop up the emperor? Now, I know I just threw a bunch of stuff at you. I wonder if I should tame it down a bit. Maybe someone can help me.
I just think there's a way of like being becoming a so there's a lot of like becoming capable of wielding violence in an imperfect world, or discipline. And like if you don't do that, you will without doing that, you kind of end up with without being able to go on an adventure and in a place of safety. It's like getting into better to be Kevin said, better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And Christianity as a practice has withdrawn from a lot of everyday life into church, like into a thing called the church. And in its absence, other forces have been able to seep in and take its place. And we have a time where we can make choices to become adventurous again. In that time, like Am I making sense,
Mm-hmm.
David?
It makes sense to me.
Would add something if you're done, Noah.
Yes.
I think there's a passage about holding a plow in one hand and a sword in the other hand, or something like that, in the right hand. And I was thinking about like U.S. Constitution. I think the better among them were trying to build a city on a hill, a shining city on a hill, and but they also enshrined in law certain things that were inalienable, that were naturally true, that they were putting in words that they're willing to fight for. So if you violate these natural laws, then this is the only time that force is justified. Is like if you violate someone's right to life or liberty, then that then we're going to bring our full force of our heart, mind, and spirit against that to uphold that, because that's necessary to it's like to make our reality match the eternal reality. Like that's what work is for, to make the covering structure that covers people in the way that God covers us. Same sort of pattern. That shape has to be upheld.
I think yes, Kevin. I think yes. I know that you're aiming at, if I mean, just the image of a sword and a plow shows continuity of life and also protecting life. So I really can get a hold of that image. And then I go back and I think what David was pointing at, I kind of lost track of it when you were talking about the word evangel and where that went. I don't know if you can recapture that, David. Can you?
Yeah, so I'm reading through. There's several references to arcs and little arcs. So he's talking about some of the monasteries, their little arcs, these little little boats of little rafts of safety.
Yeah.
And then at the end is when he brings in Evangel. It's like the last page. The name of our nave until now is Evangel. The name from now on is Evangelanta. And then he talks about Nietzsche. And then back to our Evangelanta arc, bringing news of a moon of heavenly lightings comes the raven. Back to our Evangelanta arc, bringing news of a night of fire comes the dove. Good reason to not be afraid of whatever looms to larboard, of whatever looms to starboard. Good reason to keep the adventure afloat. So I'm taking away from that, like he's kind of pointing out Christianity's down bad, but not really. I don't know. He's saying there's some reasons for hope.
So and Tommy put a a quote in the chat. Like, to have refused to look through Galileo's telescope, calling it a devil's tube, and furthermore to have refused initially to sail out into heavy southwesterlies, as the Beagle did. These refusals, singly and together, have had their consequences. It may be that they amount to a refusal of the Gethsemane experience in its modern form. And whenever or wherever Christianity refuses Gethsemane, the Gethsemane of its contemporaries, then and there it is in trouble. So, like, there are these challenges coming to, these tools coming to the church, and he, in the with the allusion of the Beagle to Darwin and like a rejection of Galileo, though I think these are, like, he's grappling with what is being brought to forms of technology and perspective that are being brought to the church and are brought to Christian peoples, and how they respond, and then how how the narrative of their response is. And these are both changes in perspective, and he's I think like this would be like, this is the what, like, when Christ is refusing Gethsemane, is he refusing a return to or when Christianity refuses Gethsemane, it refusing a return to another protective space and being like staying there. I wouldn't put maybe not that far. How is the church or Christianity interacting with these experiences? And how could
So,
how
oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
what were you getting? Am I misconstruing
Yeah,
things?
no, you're right on. The only insight that I got from those when I was reading the whole chapter on adventure was I looked and saw when this book was written, and it was published in 2012. And so we kind of have to think back on the Christian landscape in 2012, and it was not good. It wasn't good for anybody at the time. In 2012, Jordan Peterson was just coming on the scene. There wasn't any talk about re-enchantment. There wasn't a talk about combating postmodernism. Evangelicals were just entering the prime of apologetics against the new atheists. All of the craziness of the woke movement had just started, and so it seems like what Moriarty is pointing out is that Christianity at the time had a real problem with looking at the threats and analyzing them properly. And so if we look at like postmodernism in America, what had happened is that postmodernism just moved in and just wreaked havoc on American Christianity. And it kind of started spreading out to the rest of the world because there wasn't any concept on how to handle the idea of truth. And we had to figure it out on the fly against the new atheists and the postmodernists. And when he's talking about Galileo's telescope and he's talking about the Beagle, is naming enchanting? Oh, okay. Yeah, it is. I'll get to that in a second, Kevin. So when he's talking about this idea of technology, what he's doing is he's saying because Christianity isn't looking at the incoming threat and able to analyze it, or at least even look at it, they just dismiss it. It's going to conquer you. It's going to take your place, and you're going to be left out in the dust because people are going to realize that it's not the devil's telescope. It's just a telescope. but it doesn't become more than a telescope until you start using it for purposes that are more than just looking, right? The minute you use a telescope to look for enemy vessels on the waters, it's more than just a telescope. It has a significant purpose in the protection of the crew. In the same way, if you don't look at, and this is the whole thing with the Gethsemane thing, is that Christ in Gethsemane knew his death was coming, and he didn't want it, but he knew he had to take it because it was what was being brought on him by God. Christ could have, I think he had the authority to deny it, but he took the technology of the crucifixion and he and he flipped it. He does this double inversion with the resurrection. He makes this. He does what Tolkien calls the eucatastrophe. He turns this horrific death into the crux, the crossroads, the center point of Christianity. But at the time in 2012, it was not looking good for Christianity. There was no integration. We looked at things like fairies, and we looked at things like symbolism, and it was all just a path to witchcraft. But now with this idea of enchantment, at least the desire people have for an enchanted world, even though they may not use the language, people are way more accepting of this idea that there's something more going on than the material. And then Kevin asked about naming. Oh, go ahead.
Everything you just said stands up. The book was republished in 2012. It was from 1994, but like you could cut and paste different writers from 1994, and everything you said totally tracks. So I don't think it undermined your point at all, and it's still true today. So, but he passed away in 2007, I believe.
Oh, okay.
You were going to say something about Kevin's.
Yeah, Kevin asked about naming an enchantment, or wait, did he? Hold on, he might have private message. Yeah, he did. Okay, never mind. That was a private message. I'll get back to Kevin later. Okay, I'm done ranting. I'll be back. I'm going to go off mic for a second.
That was fun.
Yeah.
I loved it. I really loved understanding both of those images more clearly. The telescope, I mean, maybe I've always lived in enchantment, and so it's hard for me to understand, but I have had a lot of people fight me or put me in a, kind of cut me off because I could see it had to be there. Enchantment has to be there. But I think I've scared a few people in the world, in my Christian circle. So I see the problem. I see the idea that science has a purpose, and I see the the disenchantment with this generation, that they aren't buying the story that has been laid out for them, and they're looking for reality. Reality does hit. Maybe it hits in a cyclic manner. Like every 7 years, the cow goes through.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a book of enchantment. So I think all of us that are into enchantment are drinking it in.
Yeah, it's very good. Well, my gravy is finally done. I have to see if it fits with the potato now. So I'm going to go.
gotta
I
hop
love you
off as
guys
well.
so much.
This
I'll
was
talk
good.
to you all later. Bye.
Bye.
Pleasure. I'll see you all. Thanks for the discussion.
Bye bye. All right.